Hello, and thank you for viewing REFM's Joint Venture Partnerships Basics Foundation video. In this video, you will learn about the rationale for joint venture partnering, typical legal structuring of JV partnerships, and risks and rewards for the partners. If you like what you learn here and want to go into more detail, be sure to check out the REFM website's self-study section, where you will find the Joint Venture and Waterfall Modeling Level 3 Bootcamp product. Before we get started, first, some definitions. Within this video, we will refer to the principal, whether they are an owner or developer of an asset, or the party that raises a multi-investment fund, as the sponsor, and we will refer to the investing parties as the investors. So why would one seek a joint venture, or JV, partner? Naturally, for the sponsor, accessing cash equity capital is the primary basis for partnering. But in addition to getting the needed cash to pursue a single investment or multiple investments, there are some other benefits to a sponsor in having an investor partner. The first is better access to lenders. Equity is only part of the equation, and an enhanced ability to access debt capital through investor relationships with lenders is a benefit that can give the sponsor an advantage in its pursuits. Second is improved credibility as a player in the marketplace, especially if you are relatively new in the business or established in the business but new to a submarket or asset type. Being perceived as a believable buyer to brokers and sellers, meaning that brokers and sellers are confident in your ability and willingness to close on the transaction at the price and terms being discussed, is more crucial today than ever before. Additionally, through an investor partner, the sponsor might be able to achieve more competitive pricing on services related to development or operation of their assets. For instance, if the investor partner has a lot of investments that use a particular maintenance service, they likely have better than standard pricing with that vendor, and the sponsor would now be able to access that better pricing. Every penny saved on operating expenses is a penny earned in net operating income, so the sponsor will certainly take advantage of this. Lastly, the investor will bring strategic and technical expertise and insights to the partnership, which will help the sponsor navigate the risks inherent in their business model. Investors seek a partner naturally because they are seeking an investment vehicle for their capital. This can come in the form of development projects, existing income-producing properties, or mortgage notes. With regard to legal structuring, typically, for single transactions, a single or special purpose entity will be created and used as the legal manifestation of the investment, and this will more likely than not take the form of a limited liability company or LLC. LLCs are easy and inexpensive to form. They allow for multiple owners, and importantly, pass tax liabilities straight through to the owners, instead of taxing at the LLC level and also at the individual owner level, which is the dreaded double taxation to which corporations are subjected. With respect to multiple transaction investment funds, a limited partnership is the typical legal entity, where the sponsor is also known as a general partner, or GP, and/or managing member, and the investors are known as the limited partners, or LPs. To put an analogy in place, a joint venture partnership for a real estate transaction can be thought of as an airplane journey to a new, uncharted destination that, if reached, will yield a financial reward to all parties involved in the journey. Implicit in the formation of a partnership is the admission from both sides that they need one another to consummate the intended transaction or the set of transactions. Thus, we view both sides as enablers of the transaction. The sponsor provides the sourcing of the transaction, or to flesh out the analogy, identifies the intended destination. They then deploy capital to control the rights to that asset in some way, which can be thought of as them securing the right to fly a plane to the destination. Subsequently, the sponsor provides all of the day-to-day execution and operation related to the investment, which can be likened to the safe piloting and eventual landing of the plane. The investor, on the other hand, provides the majority of the capital, which can be seen as the leasing of the aircraft and the purchase of the fuel needed to get to the destination. And they also provide periodic strategic input, which is essentially the air traffic control function. It is critical to understand that there is a fundamental tension when partners team up, which is described by asking who is impacting the performance of the investment more, and presumably adding more value in the partnership. The sponsor allocated overhead to find and secure the transaction, and if it is a development transaction, has taken the entitlement risk. They have also, through tens or hundreds of thousands of person hours over multiple years, made thousands of decisions related to the day-to-day execution of the investment. The investor, as the primary capital provider, made the decision to invest or not invest, which required intense due diligence on the front end, but their periodic strategic input likely only amounts to hundreds or thousands of person hours over multiple years. The next element to understand is that of risk exposure, where the question to ask is, what risks are each party taking, and in what proportion? The sponsor is taking significant financial risk, although it is a minority share in the transaction. One item to note is that it can make a big difference whether the sponsor is putting its own capital at risk or putting someone else's capital at risk under the guise of it being their own. If you have ever made an investment with your own money, you know the level of conviction it takes to put your own hard-earned dollars at risk. A second type of risk the sponsor potentially takes is that of personal recourse guarantees, either partial or full, to the lender or lenders in a transaction. Personal guarantees are the pledging of the sponsor's personal assets, not those of the business, as collateral against the loan. For instance, in an acquisition scenario, if the lender has a personal guarantee from the sponsor in the instance that the asset's market value drops below the remaining loan principal amount owed, the consequence of the principal walking away from the investment is not just a loss of reputation, but also a loss of personal assets. Likewise, in a construction scenario, the sponsor might have to guarantee that the construction schedule will be met, the job will be free of mechanics liens, and it will be built in accordance with the plans and specifications on which the lending occurred, or the sponsor will be personally financially responsible to cure any deficiencies. Lastly, there is significant reputational risk to which the sponsor is exposed through their execution of the project. Real estate is an incredibly public endeavor, and you can become a hero or a villain in the eyes of the community very easily. The investor takes significant financial risk, will sometimes bear recourse risk, for instance, pro rata with the sponsor based on their relative capital contributions, and also takes reputational risk through their association with the sponsor and the investment. To expand a little further on financial risks borne by both sponsor and investor, financial risk can be comprised of front-end acquisition and development funds, construction budget shortfalls and operating deficits, which may or may not be shared pro rata between the two, and recourse guarantees, as mentioned. On the reward side, the relevant questions to ask are, in what proportion are the sponsor and investor seeking rewards for the various risks they bear and the various roles they play? More specifically, how can cash flow splits be commensurate with both risk taken and value added? And lastly, how are transactions typically structured? Unfortunately, there is no typical structure across property types, geographies, transaction types, and the hundreds of thousands of partnerships that are investing in real estate. All are negotiation specific, yet all revolve around the end goal, which is for the transaction to reach its potential despite all risks present and future. The execution requirements to achieve the goal are top performance by the sponsor, and sound input from the investor. To learn more about how partnerships are structured financially and how cash flows are split as they are produced in a transaction or a fund, purchase REFM's Joint Venture and Waterfall Modeling Level 3 Bootcamp product in the Training Self-Study section of the REFM website.